All right. Hey, everyone. We're back today for Pitch Hackers' interview series where top investors share their industry insights on the VC landscape. Today, we have Alex Pattis with us. Alex is an operator turned investor with nearly a decade of experience in scaling early stage startups and was the first employee at a startup that achieved a nine-figure exit. Now, Alex is a GP at Riverside Ventures, which is a venture fund and syndicate investing in early stage startups. Alex has invested in 200 plus companies and is enthusiastic about playing a support role to entrepreneurs in the early innings of their businesses. He also runs Last Money In, a newsletter for venture capitalists focused on explaining SPVs and their benefits. So great to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think my first question, just to kick us off, is what is an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, and how is it used in venture capital? And what motivated you to launch Last Money In?
Yeah, well, great to be here. Appreciate you having me. So I guess to jump right into it, a special purpose vehicle is essentially a vehicle that's set up for a GP to group up a bunch of maybe smaller checks from LPs, angel investors, family offices, with the sole purpose of investing directly on a startup's cap table. So it's kind of a nice way to group up smaller checks into one vehicle and then invest that directly on a cap table where it's, one line item on the cap table. And it's, in my personal experience, it was a great way to kind of scale maybe the small personal capital that I had in getting started as an angel investor and really leveraging the network and the deal flow I had to write more meaningful sized checks to a lot of these startups. Again, in my context, at the pre-seed and seed stage. So, I guess in short, that's kind of what a special purpose vehicle is, and kind of how it's used by a lot of GPs, and then also an avenue into a lot of these opportunities for LPs, those who are kind of writing some of these smaller checks, but are very interested in accessing some of these early stage startups.
I love it.
And then I guess, on the last money in front, I kind of built my more or less investing or like venture career really by doing SPVs. And for the past 4 or 5 years, it was heads down, deal by deal investing. And over the years, it accumulated to 200 plus companies. And for so long, it was just focusing on kind of chasing the next deal that we wanted to get into, where I kind of realized, there's just so many obvious differences, but also not so obvious differences of running a traditional venture capital fund versus doing SPVs deal by deal, which is what I had been doing, which is, a little, or I would say a lot less common than most of the kind of VCs or investors that we know. And I realized that, look, this was something that I was primarily doing on the side while I was operating, and then even on the side to a small micro fund in which I run. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of kind of pros, cons, great use cases for different folks to get involved, either as GPs of SPVs or LPs of SPVs. And it was, I guess for that reason, was motivated to kind of highlight all of these pros, cons, differences, ways in which SPVs can be utilized within the world of venture capital. So have been writing Last Money In for about 5 months now, and we do a weekly newsletter where we highlight kind of a different topic and go pretty deep on it.
It's great. I think, I would like to run my own fund later on as well. And I'm curious, as a stepping stone for potential emerging managers, share more about the benefits of SPVs. You talked about it a little bit, but I'd love to hear maybe just some next steps for people who really want to break out into venture and what that might look like in this process.
Yeah. So a lot of benefits to doing SPVs. I guess the first one that is kind of the most obvious to me is it's a great way to build a track record regardless of what you're doing at the time, right? Full-time working for this company or being a founder of a company or working at a venture fund or consulting or whatever it is that you do, right? You can build this track record by doing deals in a deal by deal basis, right? So you identify whatever exciting seed company or growth stage company that you want to invest in and you've secured an allocation for. And it's an opportunity to raise capital from these LPs and start to build a track record, primarily with other people's money, right? Like a fund manager would do in a traditional fund. Um, and I guess it's the best way to build that track record, like an institutional fund manager, right? Where it's, I think one also like important difference is you see a lot of people that angel invest and build a track record, and I think that's great. There's clearly nothing wrong with it, but I do think that running an SPV kind of takes it a step further, where you're actually raising capital from other LPs, unlike an angel investment.
Yeah.
And typically writing larger checks, which in the most competitive companies, it's hard to get that allocation, or it's hard to get that allocation period. But also if you're writing, a more significant size check, 100K, 500K, a million, you really have to be important to that founder. And I think by doing SPVs, that shows one, one, it is an avenue to build a track record, but two, it's also kind of the closest thing to a institutional fund manager role without actually being an institutional fund manager. So that's, I guess, one, maybe two different kind of benefits there. Also, it's a great way to meet LPs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each deal is going to have a different subset of LPs, right? This isn't a fund where you raise it all up front and you're, deploying it over 20, 40 companies over 2, 4, 5 years. So you're kind of marketing these deals to different LPs to understand what deals are the right fit for them, but it's a true relationship builder and almost a way to engage with a bunch of LPs. So, if the first deal you do, you bring in 10 LPs, that's great. But the second deal you do, that's an opportunity to bring in however many new LPs that might be interested in this, B2B SaaS or consumer or aerospace company, whatever it might be. So a really great way, in my opinion, to meet new LPs by doing SPVs deal by deal. And then also like some of the other obvious things, right? It's a great way to grow your AUM. Like maybe you're an emerging manager and you've got a very small fund, but you've got follow-on opportunities or unique access. This is a great way to deploy more capital outside of either angel investing or outside of running a micro fund or a larger fund as well. And I get maybe the last piece specifically for like emerging fund managers who are maybe building out their thesis and figuring out kind of where they want to invest. Because SPVs are deal by deal, it's a really great, it provides more flexibility, right? If you raise a fund and you decide you want to do all, seed stage B2B deals, then you, based on that fund thesis, that's what you're going to have to invest in. If you're earlier in the game and you're still trying to figure out maybe what is the best place to invest, the SPV there really is no commitment to like box yourself into anything. So it allows you to do more deals, maybe figure out what is the right long-term strategy for yourself so that when you do raise a fund, you've done a handful of deals and have a better sense of where you do want to focus. So a lot of flexibility that SPVs provide.
I love it. Super helpful. And I guess on the same track, advice for aspiring VCs. For those looking to enter the VC field, what skills and experiences do you believe are essential? I know that you were an operator and are now an investor. What have you seen in other experiences with VCs that are trying to, or potential emerging managers trying to break out?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest and most important things of a early stage VC is being able to source the right deals, right? Meet the right founders at the earliest stages, and get them excited enough about you, right? So there's a lot of different ways to go about this. Like my personal background was doing a lot of business development and sales, so I was very, comfortable with cold outreach, figuring out how to meet people and sell to them. I think in venture on the sourcing piece, it's quite similar, right? You're networking, you're trying to meet the best founders, and being able to show that you can do that, I think is going to be crucial for any early stage fund manager. In addition to the sourcing, I think, right, we've seen a trend of a lot of founders wanting to raise from operators or folks who understand that, right? Yeah. I think there's great investors who don't have operating experience, but having been in the founder's shoes or at an early stage startup, I think there's a component of like relatability that just goes further. And you understand, or at least through my previous experiences, I've understood the chaos of a startup, right? The best companies have all sorts of issues, chaos, problems, things that go south, things that need to be fixed in, a matter of hours or days or whatever it may be. So I think the more folks that can relate or have some sort of expertise that can be laser focused on helping a startup or a founder do one thing is really important. And honestly, I learned this from my experience as an angel, where I think early on, I would try and come in and be like, great, I can help with, everything under the sun. I've been at startups and I get it all. I think that's just like stupid to come in there and pretend that you can help with everything, right? You're not the CEO, you're not operating the company. But if you can really be meaningful and help push the business forward with one thing or two things that was your expertise as an operator, I think that's tremendously helpful, right? It goes a long way at that pre-seed seed stage for these founders. So I think folks that can really demonstrate that, and it shows because founders are excited to work with them, excited to have them on their cap table. Those are the individuals who are going to build a better story around why they should raise a fund and how they're able to access and meaningfully help founders at the early stages.
I love it. And on that note, what are some of the unique offerings outside of the capital that Riverside provides startups?
Yeah, so for us, it's a lot about business development, partnerships, and access to capital beyond us, right? So like we do not lead rounds or set terms. So we like to participate alongside institutional leads. However, we've got a lot of those institutional connections. So plenty of times when a company's at pre-seed or seed and we're enthusiastic about participating, we would be relatively hands-on in helping them get in touch with a lot of tier one VCs or VCs who are relevant to that specific company. So that's one way that we support. And then the others just are kind of more what I call like dot connecting, right? Oh, like this company should be partnering with that company because they've got a similar audience and have adjacent offerings. Or one of our portfolio companies could be a great customer for another company, another portfolio company or a company we're investing in. So for me, again, dating back to like my background of doing more business development, sales, partnerships, that's kind of where I've tried to be helpful to our portfolio companies. And that's my example, but I think, it could be anything, whether it's engineering or strategic, support on fundraising, digital marketing. I think, again, just figuring out where your background is and you can be really helpful with one thing, that's going to be quite helpful.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, your network is huge. Bringing that into VC, it's awesome.
I guess the other thing I'd say, which is like more of I'd say I've got less of a history, but I'm on the path. Increasingly interested in building like a personal brand and distribution that can be helpful to founders. I think I've been maybe somewhat helpful, but the newsletter that I started 4 or 5 months ago has been quite inspiring to really try and build a personal brand. So that's something, I don't know, hopefully if we talk in a year, I can say, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Super, in a meaningful way that really is helpful with startups acquiring new customers.
I love it. We'll book a follow-up next December. 1 million followers. Great. Thank you so much for sharing. It's super helpful for people, who might not have that traditional MBA, Stanford background. How are you able to get out into VC when really, I think that's such a narrow focus on how supportive people in VC can be. Like you said, serial entrepreneurs or coming from an operator background has a tremendous amount of value that doesn't come from those traditional backgrounds. So that's why I was also really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. And not to cut you off, but like, especially when you put it in that context, like that was exactly me. I'm like, right, I didn't go to Stanford, I didn't go to Harvard. There's no top tier fund that's going to look at me on paper and say, great, like you should come join our fund. But SPVs really provided that opportunity to just grab the bull by the horns and say, great, like I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
Granted, I learned a bunch on the way through meeting, thousands of founders and hundreds of VCs where I think I picked up a little bit on, especially in the earlier days, a little bit on every single call. But ultimately, SPVs were a side hustle opportunity for me to just do the job, build a track record, and then ultimately raise a micro fund because that's what I decided I wanted to do, right? For others, it could be raising a micro fund, raising a larger fund, joining a fund, whatever it is, a track record with results is going to help you navigate wherever it is in venture capital you're looking to go.
Yeah. You said something great there. You're talking about this as at the early days in the beginning, but really that was probably what, like 6 or 7 years ago, and venture as an asset class is relatively new. So I'm curious, you launched your fund, I think, back in 2020. 2021, there was this massive explosion in deployment of capital, and now we're in this downturn. So I'd love to just get your thoughts on how the venture landscape has changed and where do you see it heading?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think so. One of the things that is like a hot topic for me personally, I think more and more we're seeing the importance of brand, right? Whether it's
Mm,
the brand for your firm or the brand for you as an individual. Um, like there's just been an emergence of so many funds out there, which, I think maybe more funds came into the venture capital ecosystem that was necessary, and over time it will go back. But point being, right, like you need to differentiate yourself. So
yeah.
I think the importance of building brand, and for me, distribution is something I'm really working on. So I think folks who can do that will be positioned to stay here longer and accelerate, whether it be getting into the right deals or gaining the right LPs and raising whatever fund size that they're looking to do. Um, Also, I think you didn't necessarily ask this, but like within SPVs, which is kind of my domain expertise within the world of venture capital, it has been nice to see founders become more familiar and understanding of SPVs, how they work, the benefits of bringing a number of LPs onto the cap table in working with a SPV fund manager. So I would say since day one, it's been nice to kind of see more of familiarity from founders.
Yeah.
Granted, there's still plenty of folks who are quite unfamiliar with that. So there's still a kind of ways to go in just explaining how SPVs work when it as it relates to investing in founders. Um, I also think in the world of SPVs, it's become extremely collaborative, right? Which is great within the venture ecosystem. You've got a lot of folks that are working together, co-syndicating deals, kind of teaming up and being helpful with one another. So there's a lot of other folks like myself who run syndicates that I work with quite frequently, and they've been awesome to collaborate to either take down larger allocations and get more equity in whatever company that we're investing in, but also just the deal flow sharing.
Yeah.
I'd like to think you see a lot more there than you would in a traditional venture fund where you've got ownership targets and you have to be a little bit more sharp elbowed there. And then I think the last thing, which is kind of the obvious, yeah, we saw this crazy bull run of companies being able to raise capital quite easily in 2020, 2021, probably a couple years before that as well. And then we saw this sharp decline of access to capital and the need for companies to either become profitable or rely less on outside capital, but just show stronger economics at the earlier stages of these businesses. So I think it is healthy for the industry, right? We're going to see more durable companies
Yeah.
kind of around, and but I also like get where they were coming from, where it's like, oh, capital was so accessible, we were so focused on top line and growth, knowing that there's capital that was easily available around the corner, and that shift changed. So founders had to change quickly. Some did, some did not. I think that's the difference of which companies are around and are not around, and who's excelling. But yeah, it's been quite the, I would say, roller coaster, and even just a short amount of years here. But I think kind of where things are moving or are at now will remain for quite a bit. I don't think history does repeat itself, but I think founders kind kind of have learned the lesson on not being too reliant on capital around the corner by like external or macro environment.
Totally. And this is probably a topic of discussion for later, but the idea of being default alive while also trying to incorporate growth at all costs. I think founders are kind of coming at this intersection here where it's like, well, do you want me to stay alive or do you want me to do growth at all costs, right? Especially now that we're in this downturn. So, and you said something really unique about the SPVs too. In venture, when running your own fund, what I saw was, using SPVs as a way to build relationships. So before you have your own LPs coming in the door, you're able to offer them this select deal flow that they may not get elsewhere and build relationships over those deals. And that's what I think this entire industry is about, is relationship building, both on VC side and on founder side. If you have, like you said, distribution and network connections, you kind of have everything at your fingertips that you could want. So you're onto something.
Yeah, it's, I'd like to think so. It's been very cool to kind of ramp up in this SPV world that not too many, a lot of allocators did SPVs and did that to graduate into raising a fund or joining a fund. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That was a great way to get into venture. But I've increasingly enjoyed the flexibility of SPVs, the deal-by-deal opportunity, the deal-by-deal carry, which we didn't talk about, which has its own kind of benefits of not being tied to a fund in itself. And also, as we've just seen more of like the democratization of startups and venture capital, there are tons and tons of LPs and individuals out there who really like this deal-by-deal opportunity, right? Like, you typically have to write a more meaningful size check into a fund who, is going to deploy that capital on your behalf. They may do a great job, they may not do a great job, but you're not getting visibility or say into the deals you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that works really well for these larger family offices, these institutional funds, funds of funds, sovereign wealth funds, whatever it may be. But there's so many people that want to write smaller tickets into a lot of these companies and SPVs, whether it's me or somebody else. It's been a great avenue to be able to write the smaller check sizes and access and explore more deals where you're actually picking which deal you're going to invest in. So I just think there's something there. I'm looking to continue to lean into that and try and be an awesome SPV fund manager, which is different from a traditional fund manager.
Love it. There's so many emerging managers out there too, finding your not only thesis, but really like this is even more than a thesis. It's a way of investing that I think, now you get to educate people to be able to follow suit in your path that's really working for you. So last question before I let you go. As someone who's been on both sides of the startup ecosystem, how has your experience as an operator influenced your investment philosophy?
Great question. What bubbles up to the top for me is you're betting on people, right? Like I've seen as an operator, right? I've been a part of companies that have great ideas, that have okay ideas, but figure out how to pivot or listen to the client and ultimately sell your product and get deals done, right? Like listen, pivot, and structure whatever the product may be in a way that makes sense to your target audience. So founders are the most important for me, right? When I'm investing in a company, the ideas are important, the market's important, the product vision is important, but who's running the ship is easily the most important. That's the difference between taking a good idea to a large company or having a not so great idea, figuring out how to pivot, listening to your customers, and making it a great business. And I've got plenty of examples of founders that I backed that were rock star founders. The idea I backed at the pre-seed stage didn't make sense. They realized that, they pivoted, and now they're on, I've got multiple founders on a great track to building awesome businesses. And I've also been, unfortunate of investing in ideas that I thought made so much sense to me, but maybe that individual wasn't the right operator for the business, and it typically doesn't work out in that case. So, kind of an easy response to that question is, as an operator, that's the most important thing within the business. Everything else certainly matters, but that's always going to bubble up to the top.
Not to put you on the spot, but could you give us maybe a couple examples of what those attributes in a founder are that you look for?
Yeah, so it's nice for them to be a multi-time founder, right? Like that experience is amazing, right? Whether they had success or not, kind of being in the founder's shoes and experiencing what it takes to build a company or why a company didn't work out is going to be highly relatable onto the next company. But I just think also like that founder market fit is so important. Why? What is it about this person's background that has them positioned to run this company for this market, or this audience that they're selling into, or like this pain point where it's maybe emotional as well for them, so they're driven at kind of a level that's that's beyond just kind of trying to grow rich as a founder. So I think those are some of the most important attributes, and this kind of is related to it, but just the why. Like, why are they building this company? What do they want to get out of it? Are they passionate about solving whatever problem they're trying to solve? Those are the things that I think when founders have good answers and are truly aligned to the why, or the understanding of the problem, or understand that market through the previous business they started or the previous business they were an employee at. Those are where you see some of the best outcomes.
Definitely. When I work with founders, I really hammer home on the why, because they come to me, hey, I need help fundraising. And that's great. But after you fundraise, then you have to deploy and you have to do it right. And then you got to fundraise again, right? Like, it's this upward trajectory of
Yeah,
nonstop doing. So really, it's never going to get easier, which isn't like the
I
most
know.
heartening thing they want to hear. But if you can come back to that why and that purpose every single day, that's what's going to keep driving you. And if you don't have that, if it's not values driven or mission driven, it's money driven, it's just going to falter. It's not going to last. So
Very well said, right? Like, kind of jokingly, I talk to a bunch of founders right now, and I don't think I've ever met a founder who said, "Yeah, I really like I enjoy fundraising. Like, it's fun, right?" Everybody wants to they want to build, they want to raise their money and get back to building, but the fundraising environment can be hard right now, and it's going to be challenging, and it's yeah, it's probably going to take shots at them, but having them go back to that why and being motivated enough to overcome it and get back to building and push through, exactly to your point there, is super important here.
and the why might actually help you pivot. If it's not working, the most successful founders I've seen, they're not turning a blind eye to what's not working. It's that openness to want to be able to create and find what their customers actually want and need. So
Yeah,
that creativity is kind of what
actually,
helped it go.
yeah, like actually listening to your customers and not what you want to hear them say.
Yeah, it's a lot like easier said than done.
Yeah, I would agree. I would absolutely agree. If you're bullish on a specific idea and you think you've got the right idea,
Yeah, yeah,
you'll hear things that you believe they're saying that might not be true. So those who can truly listen to the customer pain point, I think we'll have better solutions to whatever it is they're building.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This is so helpful for me, for emerging managers, for VCs, for founders. So all in all, awesome hosting you. Anything you want to end on? Any one tip advice for anybody out there?
Um, well, this was on a first note. This was very fun. So I appreciate you inviting me here. One tip. Yeah, I guess if you're looking to get into venture, right, whether it's starting your own fund or joining a venture fund, I kind of talked about this, like putting SPVs together. I would encourage folks to try and figure out how you can get into the best deals that are really going to highlight your ability to be a good venture capitalist, and try getting out there and putting an SPV together. I think it might not work out, but you'll learn a lot. It didn't work out the first time I tried, but you're going to build great connections with future and potential LPs, people you can collaborate with. It's a great way to earn kind of carry, right? That's going to scale much more beyond your personal capital, and it's a great way to try and tackle, essentially doing the job on the side, with quite a bit of flexibility. So yeah, my advice is get out there, try, and if you failed, figure out what you did wrong and try again.
And if you want to keep learning, subscribe to Last Money In.
I appreciate that too. Yeah, that's my second piece of advice as I depart here.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. Again, super helpful. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me.